everybody. I'm here with Chris McCabe of E-commerce Chris, and we're going to talk today about Amazon suspensions, what's going on in the industry, and what you need to look out for as you get ready for 2021. So, Chris, I was curious, what are you seeing in terms of review manipulations and some of the things going on in the industry right now?
We expected more account suspensions for review manipulation or sales rank abuse this quarter than we saw. So, I mean, that's a good way to end the year, not seeing so many suspensions for that. Does that mean they're kind of laying quiet for a moment and they're kicking the can down the road till next year? Possibly. But to look at it in a more hopeful way, maybe they've done the purging, they've done the suspensions for what they consider to be the worst offenders. And, they're also kind of limiting and restricting a seller's ability to respond to reviews. There's been, changes in the last, 5 weeks in terms of things you can include in messages. I mean, they're trying to more strictly control how sellers interact with buyers, generally speaking. So that probably means that sellers are obedient and complying with those rules at this point a bit better than they were maybe a year or two ago. And then beyond that, also, I think Amazon's maybe softening their approach. I hate to say that definitively, but softening their approach to the suspending of accounts, giving it maybe a bit more time for people to adapt, let's say, to new rules and regulations. So hopefully that continues into the new year. We tend to see those types of suspensions come in bunches, come in groups. We haven't seen clusters like that all of December and back into, I would say, November and maybe even October to an extent. We haven't seen really big groups of suspensions. So that has been a good positive story for the end of this year heading into next year.
We've seen a lot of sellers move over to using the request a review button. And I think that it's just so nice for sellers to have a way to know that they're staying compliant with their messaging and never have to question it. And I feel like a lot of the changes that Amazon made with the recent communication guidelines updates are really positive for both buyers and sellers. I mean, things like communicating in the buyer's preferred language, you're just providing a better customer experience. And I'm excited that Amazon's opening more of their API up to things like that. So.
I agree. They're communicating better. I mean, they issued policy clarifications. There was all this back and forth. A good yardstick for is this working or not? I'm not getting nearly as many people asking like, what's the deal? What do I do? What can I not do? I can show them the guidelines now. They've got more detail. Things are better explained. Are they 100% perfect with everything included? No, of course not. But there's enough there that will dissuade people from making obvious mistakes, which is usually where suspensions come from. I'm kind of hopeful that sellers will copy their strategy for this for other parts of their account management, because there are other obvious mistakes people are making that I think, especially after all these years when we've been talking about these things regularly, they could be avoiding those mistakes, and then they could be avoiding other kinds of account suspensions.
So what are some of those mistakes? I know you've mentioned ASIN restrictions are a big issue that you're seeing a lot of right now. What are sellers doing that you think they should be doing better?
I mean, we're kind of surprised that so many sellers are still making mistakes with what they put in their detail page content, putting seller specific, they call that product PDP abuse, product detail page abuse, adding content that only relates to their offer, but they're on a page with other sellers. Or they're using all caps, like there's basic style guide violations that are still happening. And I know Amazon doesn't do the best job at educating everyone about this, but just because you see other sellers doing something and getting away with it doesn't mean it's not a violation. So we're still, unfortunately, coming to the end of another year where there's a lot of copycat behavior, where sellers are not really reading or understanding policies or studying them enough. They're just copying what another seller's doing on a listing in their category. A known competitor of theirs is getting away with something, so that they expect to get away with it too. And if you're violating the style guide, or if you're adding, seller specific content to a page, I mean, Amazon's cleaning up the catalog steadily, maybe not all at once, but what would we expect for 2021? More of this, more restrictions of inappropriate or non-compliant listings, violations of the style guide. I mean, eventually they're just going to start deleting these things, right, for you, instead of sending you a warning and expecting you to go through your whole inventory, all your listings, and making these corrections yourself. They might send one warning and then they might start deleting stuff, and you're not going to like that if it means that you're losing revenue because of it.
Right.
Yeah. And then the logical extension of not correcting policy violations or not taking care of ASIN level abuses is they start reviewing your whole account to take the whole thing away. And I guess one of the things that we're hoping improves next year is sellers understanding what account health is, that their risk of a suspension is growing when you hear from these guys more, whether they send you a message saying they're going to call you, or they want to talk about performance notifications you've received in Seller Central that you haven't answered yet. We're kind of alarmed that sellers aren't paying more attention to these and responding, not so much responding hastily, but understanding how to respond the right way and responding faster. And I still talk to a lot of people who are like, well, we're busy now, we'll get to it when we get to it. At this point, there is much more fear of a suspension out there that would motivate people to act. So we do see acknowledgement. Yeah, we've had some problems. I still get a certain amount every week of requests for, oh, I think we're okay overall, but we want you to review our account. We want an account review because we think Amazon's sort of beginning to look at us. And I start looking at things, and it's like, you don't need an account review. You need to start making sure you don't violate these policies immediately. You need to start reinstating these ASINs that they've taken away from you as quickly as possible. I think maybe if it's not a top selling ASIN, they're like, well, we'll get to that next month. So I'm kind of surprised and mystified that people aren't being more aggressive in how they counter those and just resolving their account health issues faster.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there's a difference between account health and seller support. And you said that sometimes sellers don't really understand the difference there. So can you explain what does it mean when account health contacts you?
Big difference. If you hear from account health, it means they're going to lead the call with you're being reviewed. They should be telling you that you're being assessed for a potential account suspension. They might just speak about certain ASINs, but they're only bringing up those ASINs because they need you to get those reinstated and those problems addressed because you're being reviewed for an account suspension. Part of the problem with Amazon's disorganized or inconsistent communication is they throw a lot of these words around to the point where people are confused about what they mean, or they're numb to it. They don't know how to interpret, what I'm being reviewed. What does that mean? Well, I know Amazon uses this word account review like crazy and in a variety of contexts. But if you hear from account health, that means something, and you have to take that seriously. Even if they don't ask you for a plan of action within 72 hours. I mean, if they ask you for that, you are being sized up already for an account suspension. But if you hear from them at all, it means that they could be asking for a POA to protect the whole account within days, within hours or days.
Sure.
Seller support, we don't deal with them much. They're totally different from account health. Don't mix those up. Those are two totally different teams that don't even interact with each other really in any meaningful way. Account health is there to talk about a potential account suspension, or you've already been suspended. They help you. In some cases, they help you write a plan of action. In other cases, they seem to spin you in circles and send you down the wrong road. But seller support is not the place to go for anything that revolves around fixing an account suspension or preventing an account suspension. So don't use those terms interchangeably. Support, don't trust most of what they tell you anyway, because they're probably reading from a script, or they're probably borrowing from a call they recently had. There's some of that with account health, but account health at least has the ability to look at what's going on in your account. That's why they put you on hold for 5 minutes when you call them. And it's important to know whether you have an ASIN that's suspended that you appeal, or an account suspension that you appeal. If you're denied and you have no idea why, account health is the team that you're asking. You're not going to support with any of that. They have no idea what to tell you. Even if they give you an answer, it's not necessarily an answer that's worthwhile.
And then if you do need to create a POA, it seems like there's a lot of conflicting advice out there. What's kind of your process in terms of doing that effectively? What would you recommend?
Detail oriented, get into the nitty gritty, make sure it's, the short answer would be make sure you're customizing things and you're writing unique content to send in a POA.
So you're not copying someone else's from a seller forum and just saying, oh, it's my company.
The number one really bad idea that for some reason people are still doing. I understand it's cheaper than hiring somebody like me to do it, with you, but is copy paste or generic content, seller performance. I think seller performance is meeting their metrics simply because of how quickly they can deny those. They have a certain number of these to do per hour, right? Everyone does.
Right.
If they have a certain percentage in every hour, whether it's 10 or 20 or 30% that are copy and paste templates, they know they can throw those away. Those have a low percentage chance of success. So I understand you can borrow somebody else's. I've seen new trends where sellers are like, well, I didn't just use the template, I modified it. I mean, did you modify it enough to tailor it to your background, your history, your needs, your problems, so that there is no more generic content in there? Well, then you've essentially rewritten it entirely. So you're not even using that template anymore.
Right.
But if it stinks of a prior template that they've already read, then you have to understand the bias of the investigator in seller performance. If they in any way connect your appeal to something they read half an hour ago, then they have already decided against you, because they know that you're not doing your homework, you're not doing any research, you're not looking into your quality control or trying to figure out why your late shipment rate is high or any performance or policy issues you have. All you're doing is borrowing from somebody else, and you haven't done any work to figure out what's wrong that you have to troubleshoot. So if you haven't taken any troubleshooting steps, obviously they can't accept the plan of action because they know you haven't fixed anything for the future. So
right.
That's the number one. Number two, of course, would be just know your, if you hire a consultant, know your consultant, KYC, right? Instead of know your customer. Consultants come in all shapes and sizes. We see new ones popping up with ads or stuff showing up on Google every week. Lots of them boast years of experience, and the one I looked at yesterday, I think it said 95 or 98% success rate. They're obviously just making it up. I've never heard of them before. If I have heard of them, they've been inadvertently sending me business because they can't get anyone reinstated. Lots of this stuff is make believe. So I hate to put it in a stark and harsh way, but don't be gullible. I mean, gullibility isn't something, some people have more street smarts than others. Some people are savvier at business than others, but the Amazon space, I know we've got loads of new sellers joining probably in 2021. You have to be sophisticated about how you approach asking people for help. If you approach the wrong people or they approach you to get help with troubleshooting Amazon problems, keep in mind that there can be lasting consequences and future damage to your business beyond just, well, we tried some guys and that didn't work out, so we're going to replace them with somebody else.
Being new isn't an excuse when it comes to Amazon. I think, people think of a learning curve, but
no. Ignorance and obliviousness. Amazon's different from other elements of business, other parts of the world of e-commerce and of trade, where beginner mistakes aren't really tolerated at Amazon, and we can debate and argue whether or not that's fair. Whether it is fair or not, Amazon doesn't care. They expect you to know a certain amount going in. They hold you to a high standard. In a strange way, if you make beginner mistakes, instead of being understanding about that and having patience, they look at it the other way, which is, if you're making these kinds of screw ups now, then you'll make even bigger ones later. So if we can't trust you with the basic stuff, we can't trust you with anything. And so they're motivated not to give you a second chance. That's how the reversal hits people kind of like a tsunami. They understand, well, I'm new, but actually Amazon's punishing me for being new. They're not being more lenient. They're being more aggressive and cruel and harsh. And my answer is always, yeah, that's deliberate. They're doing that on purpose. This is a kind of a Darwinian landscape where this is an accidental. I mean, some of it's accidental, like runaway automation and sloppy investigations by seller performance. I mean, that's not necessarily what they intend, but they're totally okay with new sellers, new brands, new accounts falling by the wayside if they think you stumble out of the gate. They do not, it's all about buyer experience, right, at Amazon. They do not want to trust you with even more buyers or increase their own liability by hosting you as a seller. So early mistakes to them are red flags and warning signs. at the bare minimum that you weren't ready to do Amazon, you did it anyway. Or like we said a minute ago, you hired the wrong people to help you. You believed what they said. They were, marketers, or I don't know. We seem to see a lot of one size fits all. Amazon is overly punitive to new sellers on purpose, I believe. They're okay with them falling by the wayside if they think that they don't know what they're doing and that they've prematurely started their Amazon business simply because of a service they hired or a course they joined. They're aware that there are these, classes and courses and groups out there, but you got to look at it from their perspective, which is they're trusting you with their buyers. And if you're making early mistakes, you shouldn't expect tolerance for that because you're harming the buyer experience, which is what Amazon owns in the process. So if you're expecting leniency because you're going to learn as you go along, Amazon is not the place to do that. If you're brand new, you study up, you train, you audit, you perfect things as much as you can before you start, as much, maybe before you start at all, but early in selling, because there are people who get suspended a week or 2 days or 2 weeks in.
Yeah. Seller forums are full of them.
They make basic mistakes and then they turn on Amazon and say, why are you hitting me so hard? Why are you so aggressive? Why are you so bad to sellers? I understand that to an extent, but beyond that point, I don't, because Amazon has been, very, very aggressive with this stuff for a long time. And this is common knowledge, public knowledge, not to a new seller. I understand if you're brand new, you won't know everything that you know, or that I know, or that sellers know. Unfortunately, none of that is an excuse to them. They do expect you to have some good working knowledge before you begin your business. We can debate whether or not that's fair, but they don't care if it's fair. That's what matters. They're the ones, their vote is what counts, not yours. So if they don't think you're ready, you're on, everyone says it's their sandbox and, they control it rigidly. Yes, but you probably shouldn't start something if you're not ready to do it, no matter what it is. Would you start baking a cake if you didn't have the list of ingredients in front of you? If you were just winging it with different materials around your kitchen, would you expect the cake to turn out well? They think that if you start screwing up, it's not just teething problems. When I was working in seller performance, I used to read all these emails about, well, we started and we made some mistakes. We had teething problems, or, we stumbled out of the gate. And I was concerned that those sellers spoke of it as if it was really just innocuous, well, we had some screw ups in the beginning, but we were new and we didn't really know what we were doing. And, we just didn't understand how Amazon worked. And then they left it there, like that was in their appeal, as if that justified it or made it okay. Again, we might think it's okay for a new business to have those problems, but it's what Amazon thinks, which is it's not okay. And you might not get that many cracks at it either. So if you mess up in the beginning, look at all the related account suspensions we saw last month. A lot of people just tried to start over. You can't just press a do-over button with Amazon. They don't work like that. They'll tell you to reinstate the suspended account, not start a new one. Well, why did they do that? It's because they want it to be the most trusted marketplace. They want it to be the most regulated or rigidly policed marketplace. That's why we see so many false positives on the account suspensions. It's because they'd rather get more of you and let a few of you back on than let you all go and have, roaming the barnyard type behavior. They don't want that on Amazon.
There's so much to that buyer trust and just the ecosystem that Amazon has built. And I think it does take a lot to keep it up.
Yeah. Imagine down the road 2 or 3 years, maybe Walmart will be a more formidable competitor for Amazon. And if Amazon has a history of protecting their buyers to the extent of making sure that every seller that a buyer could potentially purchase from has been vetted to a much higher standard than you would see on Walmart, they're going to get a certain percentage more orders than Walmart per day, per week, per month. And Walmart sellers, I'm just using Walmart as an example, it might be another site down the road, but Walmart sellers might not be considered as trusted as Amazon sellers. Well, how do you get to that point with what they're doing today? with new
Right.
brands, new sellers that come on, making sure that the first message you get as a new seller isn't, hey, Amazon's pretty lax. You can kind of have your way with it. You can be creative with how you want to sell.
Throw some spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks.
Just try this, try that. Some items ship late, no big deal. We're not worried about last mile delivery. We're not worried about 1-day Prime. Just have a good time with it. Let your hair down. That's not what this is.
Right.
This is like, no, you're going to have to work some weekends, maybe most weekends, or hire people who are going to work and manage your account on weekends. That's what this is.
It's a legitimate business. I think a lot of people outside of the Amazon and e-commerce space can look at it and say, oh, you sell on Amazon.
Right.
What do you do? Spend 2 hours a day, running to the post office or something. But
right.
You're running a real business. You have
right.
to, yeah.
It's not a hobby. I understand that in the early days of the marketplace, I mean, I was working at Amazon during those years, some of them at least. In the early days of the marketplace, hey, join us.
Right.
We want small businesses. Now they have them all. They have many of them. Now they can start whittling down who they want and who they don't. And that's where it does get into a, rather unfortunate game of survival of the fittest. But in a way, that's what business was anyway, right before Amazon. If you have a competitor that can outlast you, underprice you, whatever, they would win and you wouldn't. This is just another permutation of that, which is we've already attracted all the eyeballs and all the sellers. Now it's just a question of how many brands can sell how much stuff. And even beyond that, will Amazon have their own brands that'll compete with those brands better than they do today? I mean, lots of Amazon brands today don't even sell. So, now is the time to capitalize on the fact that Amazon's brands haven't even caught up to people yet.
Yeah.
And to make sure that you're not giving them any excuse to suspend your listings or your account, because they'll take it every time.
That's a really good point. And just to kind of wrap up, as we're looking forward to the new year, is there any kind of nugget of advice you'd like to leave sellers with?
Yeah. Focus on your account health. Understand that the account health dashboard doesn't update correctly that often. So just make sure you're paying close attention to the specific performance notifications and you're resolving them. And you're not being hasty or appealing sloppily. I'm not saying that, I never will, but you act quickly and effectively in doing it the right way, and you resolve those as they come in so that your account won't show up as at risk. I know they have this flashy new graphic there that says at risk yellow. I mean, part of the reason that it's at risk is people aren't resolving their notifications the right way, or they're appealing with templates and they're just like, we'll get the ASIN reinstated doing it the quick way. And it doesn't really work that way. I mean, if they see anything wrong with a POA lately, they kick it back to you at least once. I never hear from sellers anymore that are like, well, we had a few problems. We tidied them up easily. Amazon responded quickly. I mean, how often does anyone hear this anymore? How many times are people told they need more details in their POA plan of action? How many people are just declined and they're not even told why? Which is why I was bringing up calling account health to find out. Sometimes account health reps don't even know why. Don't expect them to know everything. Sometimes they can't even tell you why it's been declined. So if they work there and they can't tell you, probably tells you that you want to maximize your appeal chances on the way in and not assume that you can slip and fall as many times as you want until it's resolved. I mean, that's also time consuming and that's also stressful. So who wants that?
When your whole business is riding on it, you don't want to mess around or take a chance.
No.
Yeah, so I think this was great, Chris. Thank you for taking the time to talk to Ecom Engine customers about what's going on with suspensions and planning for 2021. If you want to find Chris, you can check out his website at ecommercechris.com, and he has some great resources there. You can also contact him through the website. Is that right, Chris? If they have questions or
we've got some exciting stuff this coming year. We're starting a podcast. Going to have that on my website, also the blog for content. If you're, for people looking for like free resources that can help keep them up to date, because you definitely can't tune out what's going on and what the trends are. One great thing about Ecom Engine with us at E-commerce, Chris, is we've been since I think 2015 keeping like our audiences up to date on trends. that's going to be extremely important. Not excruciating, hopefully. Extremely important for 2021 because the trends come and go very quickly now. And you have to keep your ear to the ground and know what's going on in terms of why is Amazon investigating the way they are? Why are they handling appeals the way they are? What those trends are. I mean, look at what we've seen in the past for review manipulation suspensions. A lot of those are people who didn't, I mean, back in the old days, they didn't understand how you could solicit a review from a buyer and how you couldn't do it. And they were just kind of listening to the wrong people and winging it. So we expect
and there's
that.
A lot of bad information out there. I mean, like you said earlier.
Yeah. Anyone who's trying to attract your dollars is going to promise you that they're an expert just by splashing content that you somehow see in an ad or anywhere. So even if they have to make up what they're telling you, they know they're going to get a certain amount of business just by putting it in front of you. It's up to you to be the discerning audience and to research and to fact check. It's just like fact checking news sites that you watch, or read. You can't take anyone's word for it anymore. You have to scrutinize their background and their sources and how do they know what's going on. If you just believe what you read, being an Amazon seller is probably the worst thing you can decide to be. You're almost better off selling somewhere else or having your own website if you're just going to, I'm sure they tell you this just as much as they do me, but hey, I read this somewhere. I read it on this page. I read this. I saw this on the forums. Yeah, I mean, you can read anything. You can go to a meetup. It's not just the forums, right? I mean, Facebook groups. There's a million Facebook groups. Some of them are the blind leading the blind. You can go to a meetup where, I mean, just to give you an example, I went to a meetup in Thailand a couple of years ago, which was interesting for me just to see a bunch of Amazon sellers, mostly Westerners, but a bunch of Amazon sellers in one place in Asia talking about Amazon. And the people, we won't name anybody, the people leading the meetup were giving everyone terrible advice and bogus information. It was a sales pitch.
Yeah.
I'm glad I went just because it was a good experience for me to see all the sales pitching. And to understand what people were believing. And at some point, somebody there mentioned that I used to work at Amazon. I was the last person they wanted to talk to at that meetup. They wanted to pitch their version of what the world of Amazon looks like. And of course, for my ears, none of it resembled reality. So it was a good wake-up call for me too, to know that that kind of content's out there.
Yeah, and I mean, getting back to an earlier point, Amazon's fighting against that misinformation all the time as well. So some of these, I think sometimes the rules and guidelines can seem a little restrictive or, like, oh, why are they getting so detailed about whether I have a space here or whatever? But a lot of times there is an overarching reason.
Yeah. Amazon has a major task trying to root out people giving bad advice, creating havoc in the marketplace, not just the fraudsters and the black hats. They're already well on their way to, policing that. But you're creating, when you make mistakes based on bad info, you're creating more work for Amazon. So next time you want to complain about how Amazon handles sellers, you got to remember that lots of sellers are doing the wrong thing out of ignorance. And to Amazon, that's a seller problem, not Amazon's problem.
Yeah.